of all mankind, believing always in the brotherhood of man and the fatherhood of God. The motto of the organization is one God, one aim, one destiny. Therefore, the race and the generations of men shall be called blessed. Now that's the preamble of the Constitution. I am tempted to read the whole Constitution, but I wouldn't do that. You know, that's something that we're still working with. There are a lot of things in there might cause some problems for some folks. Not the folks on the program here, but you never know. Okay. We go to the next, which is the aims and the objectives of the UNIA-ACL. So let me give it to you. Objects and aims. This is also coming out of the Constitution, mind you. The objects of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League shall be to establish a universal confraternity among the race, to promote the spirit of pride and love, to reclaim the fallen, to administer to and assist the needy, to assist in civilizing the backward folks of Africa, to assist in the development of independent Negro nations and communities, to establish commissionaries or agencies in the principal countries and cities of the world, irrespective of nationality, to promote a conscientious spiritual worship old language to us. And so, but the organization that was using, but I'll introduce the others those who are here, and I'll try somehow to reach the missing person. The others, those who are here, and I'll try somehow to reach the missing person. The others, okay. Okay, we've got. Oh, wait a minute. I'm getting an echo too. Okay.
Somebody has their Facebook feed on.
Okay, we've got. Oh, wait a minute. I'm getting an echo too. Okay.
Somebody has their Facebook feed on.
Ooh. I hope we're not getting a problem, my sister, from your end.
I certainly hope not, as the computer is in the other room, but let me go check.
Oh no, man, that might be Babose Shango. You got your Facebook on with you there? Anyway, okay, it seems like we're okay now. All right. Okay. Let me go to the business of introduction. As I said, we've got some serious people here. First, I'll mention the good sister, Sister Jacqueline Luqman, and let me mention some others first, and then we'll come back to her so that she can give you a biographical sketch of herself, and maybe give us an intimation of what we're going to be getting this evening. All right, Brother Rafiki Morris is here with us, and that's a brother who's been in the struggle for a very long time. He's the name Rafiki, I forgot. Was that name? Well, he'll tell us later. But I think it has some meaning dealing with fighting the power. Okay. All right,
I can't hear you. You're sticking.
You can't hear me?
You're sticking. It's like a
Oh my gosh.
I was checking to see if that was on my end, but
yeah, let me see if anybody else is anybody else having problems there, Wi-Fi wise. Is
okay on my end?
Going? Huh?
It's okay on my end. I can have it right.
Okay.
It seems to be all right now.
Okay. All right. But I was saying, Baba Rafiki, I think I was saying that your name may have something to do with fighting the power. That name Rafiki. So, but I don't know. Maybe you'll tell us later. Okay. And Brother Babose Shango. You know what Shango means, right? That's that's the Lord of Iron. That's the iron-fisted brother.
No, fire.
Oh, it's fire. Oh, is that what it is? I thought that okay. Well, that's even I guess better.
And
thank you for that.
fire and a supreme administrator.
Oh, there you go. All right, so you don't be fooled, folks. We aren't playing here tonight.
It takes fire to make steel.
Yes, indeed. Now we should have had Brother Dhoruba Bin Wahad. I am not sure what has happened with him. I failed to give him a heads up. I did yesterday, but maybe I should have done that today as well. So let's see what happens. Okay. So now, after that introduction of the list of folks on the panel, I'm going to return to Sister Jacqueline and allow her to give us a little background on herself and what we can expect coming from her this evening. Sister Jacqueline.
So thank you very much, Babose, for having me on this event, on this esteemed panel. I always feel so unqualified to be speaking about these issues, but I am an African, I am a Pan-Africanist, I am an anti-imperialist, and I am a member of the Black Alliance for Peace. I'm an organizer for the Mid-Atlantic region of the Black Alliance for Peace, where the Black Alliance for Peace exists to revive the Black radical anti-imperialist, anti-war peace tradition in the Black community. So this is important for me, as it's been a part of my political focus for a lot of my life, even before I realized what I was doing. And the Black Alliance for Peace has given me an organizational base to be able to channel that passion for Pan-Africanism and for the liberation of Africa, and for the to fight for the end of colonialism, neocolonialism, and imperialism around the world, for the freedom and justice of all working class, poor, oppressed, and colonized people around the world. And I'm also co-host of the radio show By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C., which, yes, is under quite a bit of Ministry of Truth, U.S. Ministry of Truth suppression right now. We have been censored from several podcast platforms. We are up again on another podcast distribution platform, Podbean.com, and you can find us on Washington, Sputnik Washington podbean.com, and search for By Any Means Necessary. But my host, Sean Blackman, and I, we do the same work on that show. We focus on the ground movements, uprisings, labor organization, people fighting for tenants' rights, all of the fights that working class, poor, oppressed, and colonized people, not just domestically, but around the world, are engaged in for their freedom. So that's what I do, a day job. And I'm also a Christian in the James Cone, Albert Cleage, Radical Jesus strain. So I'm a member of the Plymouth Congregational United Church of Christ, where I am an organizer with the Board of Social Action in that church, where we focus our organizing efforts on realizing and advocating for peace for oppressed people from the biblical point of view. So I don't consider myself special. I don't consider myself all that learned or intellectual. I just want my people to be free. And I think probably what makes me different from a lot of other people that I know is that I know my people aren't in the first place. So I think that is the major hurdle we have to overcome to getting our people involved in this struggle the way we are. So that is me.
Well, that is a good thing that you did by giving us that picture of who you are. And I'm sure that, you know, our audience will appreciate it, that you're on with us this evening. Next, we'll come back to later on to, you know, give some your I guess your version of what you think is happening today. But let me go to next. Oh, that's Brother Rafiki. All right, Brother Rafiki. I know you. Well, don't let me even make any statement. You go right ahead, jump right in there, and give us who you are.
Yeah, African, actually, that's probably the hardest thing in the world for me to talk about is who I am. So you kind of put me on the spot. Well, my name is Rafiki Morris. And I'm an organizer with the All African People's Revolutionary Party. I joined the movement at the young age of 17. And I've been working with the AAPRP since 1974. I was a student and youth organizer for many, 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 many years. I was well into my 40s. I still thought I was a youth. I work with all kinds of organizations around the world, liberation movements from Africa, Latin America, Central America, the Caribbean, the Asian liberation organizations, the Palestinians, the Native Americans. And I never thought of this work as a career, but it has spanned quite a number of years now. And we're still moving forward with that. I'm a painter, so I'm an artist. I paint pictures. I'm a muralist. I also write stories and write political commentary, history, and things of that nature. As far as my, I guess, synopsis of what my life is about, what we're all about, is that our people are oppressed and exploited. And this is a reality that persists everywhere on the planet Earth that you find people of African descent. And the ending of that oppression and exploitation is the subject of our work. This is what we're fighting for. This is what we're working to achieve. And we do this in solidarity with humanity, because it's not Africans alone that are catching hell from capitalism and imperialism and Zionism. So, my work as an individual changes a lot over the years, but it persists and it continues. And I'm just as convinced today as I was when I was 17, that victory is assured. It is certain. We will win. Our enemies will be defeated, and we'll make a better life for African people all over the world, which is what Pan-Africanism is all about. And so we're here. We're glad to be here. We're glad to address the topic today of what's happening in Ukraine. We know a lot about Europeans fighting Europeans from history, going a long ways back. And we think we, would love to be a part of this conversation.
All right, my brother. I thank you for being here. And we'll move to Brother Babose, who's another veteran in the struggle. So, Brother Babose, if you don't mind, just give us a little background.
My brother, let me first thank everybody. Most of the folks there I know. I see my brother Arturo Griffith is here, and that's always great. I know he has a lot to contribute. I also started out in the movement in the civil rights era. And I was listening to Brother Morsi gives the objectives of the UNIA. And I do remember back in the 60s, I don't want to really date myself, but back in the 60s, I had the pleasure to do some work with the Honorable Mr. James, who was the President General of the UNIA, the last President General after Marcus Garvey. And I raised that question to him that you just raised, where one of the objectives of the UNIA was to civilize the backwoods tribes of Africa. And I said, Mr. James, isn't that rather racist on our part? Talk about civilizing the backward tribes of Africa? And he said, no, brother, you don't understand. He said, the backward tribes of Africa is those Africans here in the United States who don't know who they are. And I say, oh, well, that explains it. I came up out of the student, youth, Black nationalist, Pan-Africanist movement. And along with Brother Rafiki, we shared a lot of work inside the AAPRP. I'm currently a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, GC. I am not the expert on Europe in no form or fashion, but you don't have to be an expert to understand what's happening. You know, I'm a dialectician, and dialectics teach us that nothing is isolated. We must search
The truth.
for the various causes of what's happening in the world so that we can make a proper assessment as necessary to wage the correct struggle against or for what is happening.
That's the right time.
So I'll probably stop here.
Okay, my brother. Someone was just speaking. I don't know if that's Sean Smart. Please mute your mic, everyone, when you're not. Yeah. Okay. 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 All right. Thank you, my brother, for that synopsis. Let me say that you don't have to be an expert to deal with this matter, because this is a matter that is concerns Africans everywhere. It's the fallout we're worrying about. And we've got some folks here who will give us a little bit about it. I know Brother Dhoruba is heavy on that side, but he's not on us yet. So hopefully we'll get him pretty soon. All right. So meanwhile, let's go back to where we need to start for the discussion. And I want to bring that back to my good sister. We all, we almost rolling in time here. That's good. Sister Jacqueline, let me hear from you now. Let me. Maybe I should try to set the stage here. Folks, our African people. The reason why we're saying that, or we have used the theme, the Russia, NATO, Ukraine conflict, understanding that, and the African perspective is that we consider Africans everywhere Africans, no matter where you are. So whether you are from the continent or the United States or South America or wherever, whatever is your perspective, that's the perspective of an African. And so with that, we Africans here, most of us we're in the United States, this is a perspective of Africans, like you had said earlier about Babose, from the tribe, we're in a situation here from what you just said that, hey, we might need to do some educating. a lot of our folks here, you know, we're influenced highly by what is produced by the corporate press, corporate media. And they have a narrative that is spread all over the world and is constantly coming at us and reminds me of the Mr. Goebbels in the old days, you know, Second World War. He had said a certain things about bombarding you with whatever information, disinformation, whatever. If it's lies, sooner or later you're going to believe it. And we want our African people to understand that you just don't believe things or because it's being said or coming from higher ups, from anywhere. We need to analyze the things that are coming at us before we have a perspective or come to or an opinion. And we just don't grab what somebody, especially if those people don't have your own interests at heart. And we see a lot of that. So we want to bring this out this evening to give our people a perspective of those people. And you folks on this panel, I know you, all the experience you've had, you are not easily swayed by what is coming from the corporate press. So that is why we want to have your opinion on here, because we know this and people are getting a one-sided view of things. And we want to have a view that incorporates all sides, so to speak. So I'm going to start with Sister Jacqueline and let her give her perspective or part of it, because we're going to have we're going to interact with our conversation and questions coming from me or others, so that we can get an idea of what the African is thinking regarding this issue. Because again, it's a European issue, but it's an issue that affects us all. This is a global situation. This is no longer the old days. Anything that happens there can affect. So we want our people to understand, not to ignore it, not to come to a conclusion because it's given to you by certain people, but to get out there and analyze from which you're hearing from all directions. Okay, my sister, after my saying that, let me hear what you have to say.
So thank you so much. And I hope that people will not hear a whole lot of echo, because I'm getting that a little bit on this end. So I apologize if that happens beforehand, but the first thing I want to say about the situation in Ukraine is that thank you so much. We have to be careful not to get into a discussion. So I apologize if that happens. About, oh, I'm sorry, I'm seeing from the technical support that I should close the door here. So let me do that. All right, I hope that is better. So what I don't want us to do is to get into a discussion or a quagmire about whether we support Russia in their actions or not. This is a common deflection that I am seeing people make, particularly with African folks, as almost sort of a litmus test, right? So this is my position on it. And as a member of the Black Alliance for Peace, I think it is safe to say that this is the Black Alliance for Peace's position on it as well. Individually, as a person, I support armed struggle in the pursuit of liberation from colonialism, neocolonialism, and imperialism. The question then becomes whether Russia is involved in liberation struggles. If we look at the civil war in the Donbass, Crimea, and Luhansk, and other regions that was started in 2014, some people would argue that Russia is operating as a liberating force, but that is not our concern. Because once we get mired into whether Russia is right or wrong and whose side this one on is and that one is on, what we begin to do is to deflect from the primary contradiction, the primary impetus for this conflict, and that is the US, EU, NATO axis of domination. So what do I mean when I'm talking about the US, EU, NATO axis of domination? I am talking about the fact that the entire conflict really began in 2014, if we want to look at just the modern history of the conflict. It was the result of the former president of Ukraine deciding that it was economically not feasible for Ukraine to join with the European Union in a trade deal. Russia was largely ambivalent about it. But of course, the US was not. The EU was not. So once this trade deal is not signed, then there's this unrest in Ukraine. And we don't have an understanding of the demographics of Ukraine because we are assuming that everyone in Ukraine are just generally white people. And okay, technically that's true, but there are ethnic differences among the people of Ukraine, where you have at least 1/3 to some people say up to a half of the population of Ukraine who are ethnic Russians, who never wanted to be a part of the EU deal because they live in the largely working class mining areas of Luhansk, the Donbass region, Crimea. There are all of these other interests of working class people that are involved in this conflict that has not been elevated. So you have a Ukraine that's split, and truly Ukraine historically has always been split. But starting 2014 with the EU looking at Ukraine to become a member of the European Union as the first step to becoming a member of NATO, the Ukrainian president at the time said, you know what, this is a bad deal for us because the Europeans are not willing to make up the losses we would incur if we cut off all ties with our largest foreign investor, Russia. So, of course, the United States is not happy with this. Ukraine historically has always had a very large, very significant neo-Nazi fascist problem that goes right back to World War II, where Stephen Bandera and his bunch of right-wing fascists actually aided, they were collaborators with the Nazis in rounding up Jews, helping them with massacres, and helping them to invade Russia. So remember now, the Russian the invasion of the Nazis in World War II came through Ukraine with the help of fascists that during the Nuremberg trials at the end of World War II, the German Nazis, some of them, were punished. A lot of them were incorporated into US and European government positions, very high level US and European government positions. But the Ukrainian fascists were not a part of the Nuremberg trials at all. It was very hush hush, don't say anything about them. So when we're talking about now, there is a large and sizable fascist presence in Ukraine that doesn't come out of nowhere. We're not making this up out of whole cloth, as some people would have you believe. That's historical, and it absolutely goes back to World War II and the Nazis. So the ethnic Russians in the Donbass region, Crimea, Luhansk, they didn't want to be a part of the EU. They saw the unrest in Kiev, with some people being angry that the deal was not made with the EU. There were organic that started, but those folks in Luhansk and Donbass and Crimea, their position was, we don't want any part of this anymore, because Ukraine wants too badly to be a part of the EU and NATO, and if Ukraine becomes a part of the EU, then they will impose their neoliberal modernization, privatization policies that will destroy our livelihoods. They'll take over our minds, and we won't have jobs anymore. We will become a vassal state to them, and we don't want to do that. So they voted to secede from Ukraine. 80% voter turnout, 97 point something percent people voted to secede from Ukraine in these regions. The Ukrainian president, who at the time, by then, is the coup president that the US installed, because they ran the former president out, and they did that with the help of the fascists and the neo-Nazi groups in Kiev. So for 8 years after all of this coup happens, the people in Donetsk, Luhansk, Crimea vote to secede from Ukraine. They want to rejoin the Russian Federation. Why? Well, because they're ethnic Russians in the first place. And they were sort of given to Ukraine in World War I, I believe. So they never wanted to be a part of Ukraine. They vote to rejoin the Russian Federation. The Washington's propped up president in Kiev doesn't recognize their vote and says, nope, not going to let you secede. Barack Obama does not recognize the vote, literally says the US and the international community doesn't recognize the vote at all. And a civil war that no one reports on. No one in Western media reports on the fascist-fueled civil war that resulted from that. Now, that's a quick and dirty, really high level, really quick in 5 minutes explaining how we got to here. But that's only one part of how we got to here. The other part of how we got to here is NATO. Because since World War II, the end of World War II, allegedly, NATO and the NATO countries have promised not to expand NATO closer to Russia's borders. But they have broken that promise, and there have been formal agreements by several US presidents promising the Russians over several Russian presidents that NATO would not be expanded past its post-World War II borders. But NATO has now expanded into 13 countries closer to Russia. And several of those countries are literally on the border of Russia now. And over the past several years, NATO, the US, EU, and their ally countries have been conducting military exercises in those countries bordering Russia in clear violation of 2 formal Minsk Accords, promising not to do exactly what they've been doing, putting weapons and troops on the border of Russia. Not only have they been doing that, but they've been escalating the number of troops, escalating the exercises, bigger, more troops, more weapons. Russia sees this. They remember World War II. They understand what happened in 2014. They know that the fascists are in the army in Ukraine now. So Russia begins amassing troops on its border in its country, which was not what was reported here in the United States. So this is what has brought the world to this point where all of the focus is on Ukraine. And, you know, Putin is Vlad the Impaler now, you know, the new version of Vlad the Impaler, and we have to be terrified of him, and we must stop Putin at all costs. And all of the narrative about this conflict has been about what Putin has done. And I'm certainly not going to sit here and defend a leader of a you know, Euro descended country. What I will say is that the country that has over 800 military bases around the world, that has used NATO to foment coups exactly like they did in Ukraine in countries full of people who look like us for years. I mean, before Afrikan in Africa, there was NATO. So the country that has assassinated countries' leaders because they did not want them to implement socialism. I'm talking about the Thomas Sankaras and the Amilcar Cabrals and the Mehdi bin Barkas I can never get his name right. Olympio, the Togolese president. The country that has had a hand in assassinating liberation leaders who chose for themselves and their people socialism because they saw what capitalism and colonialism would do. So they wanted another path. I would never believe the media apparatus of the countries that had a hand in colonizing our people and also assassinating the leaders of our people who pursued liberation from that colonization. And certainly I will say, as an African, we have to keep in mind that we should not romanticize the role of the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, in the liberation struggles of those African leaders, of those African countries, because the Brezhnev doctrine was basically, we come to the aid of any socialist country that is under attack. That was the Brezhnev doctrine. So the Soviet Union did that even before Brezhnev. They came to the aid of socialist countries and liberation movements that were pursuing socialism, not out of any great love for African people, but out of a commitment to the ideals of socialism, and certainly for their own personal gain, obviously. But we don't want to romanticize the role of the Soviet Union in African liberation struggles, but we also don't want to diminish them, because it was the excuse that the US and France, Belgium and Switzerland and all of these former colonial powers on the continent, their excuse for assassinating our great leaders, our great intellectual liberation giants, was to stop communism on the continent, because they did not want the influence of the USSR to be spread on the continent of Africa. So when we're looking at this conflict right now, what does this mean for African people? We cannot look at the role the US, the EU, and NATO has played in using Ukraine as a pawn to wage a proxy war against Russia, because that is what they're doing, because the US would dare not put boots on the ground right now in an all-out war against Russia. No, they're using Ukraine as a proxy to wage that war against Russia. We cannot look at this and not look at everything the US, EU, and NATO axis of domination has done everywhere else in the world up to this point. So for me, this moment in time, this particular conflict points to all of the other conflicts that have bloodied the hands of the US, EU, and NATO all around the world, in Libya, in Afghanistan, in Yemen, in Syria, in Palestine, all over the continent of Africa, and yes, even here in the United States of America. So I think the importance of this conflict is certainly that we're this much closer to a nuclear conflagration. I think that is true. And I think that Russia has, in not getting fully involved in the conflict for 8 years while the civil war has gone on against ethnic Russians in Ukraine, they've shown a measure of restraint that clearly the United States and any other European country, they don't know what that is. But at the same time, I think that we would be wise to see this conflict for what it is. It is what imperialism has always looked like for our people, for colonized people, for people in the global South, for people in the Middle East, for people who look like us, who sat on some resources that these people wanted. The only difference in those conflicts and this one is, of course, the media coverage, because everyone is on television crying and weeping over the little white children clutching bunnies in the middle of a war zone, but nobody cried for those Libyan children being stood up on a slave block in Libya after the assassination of Muammar Gaddafi. Nobody cries for the Palestinian children whose homes are blown up to this day. Nobody cries for the children in Niger. Nobody cries for the children in Mali. Nobody cries for the children in Haiti. The world is crying for all of these white children in the middle of the war, and I certainly want this conflict to stop. But I think that our role in this conflict is not to look at only Ukraine, but to look at all of the countries that the US, EU, and NATO axis of domination stepped on the way to Ukraine.
All right, my sister, let me stop you there.
Yes.
That's quite a bit. You've given us quite a big picture there, and you know, we'll do a little bit more from questions and so on. We'll give people the other presenters a chance to put forward their opinions, and then we'll come back. So on the listing here, next comes Brother Rafiki. Yes, can you?
Yeah,
All
I'm
right, you
unmuted.
ready?
Yes,
All right.
I am. Yeah, with
Can
your
you
first
add, subtract, or or multiply what you just got? Come on.
Actually, I'm used to Jacqueline giving my speech before I get this.
Oh, is that right? Okay. Well, all right.
Tag team. I gave the layup.
Yeah, it's a tag team. Yeah, and I did mention because you threw me off with that question about myself. I'm also an organizer with the Black Alliance for Peace, and a member of their coordinating council. I represent the AAPRP inside of Black Alliance for Peace, which is an alliance of a number of organizations and individuals who are working against the U.S. war machine. I think that I think a couple of things. Number one, Africans, we talk about looking at things from an African perspective, and we really need to try to have a understanding of what that is, this African perspective. Because, I mean, to me, it says that we're looking at whatever it is, whatever the circumstance or whatever the situation, from the point of view of our own interest, right? Of the interest of African people, of the interest of Africa, and by extension of the interest of the people of the world. So that is our perspective. Some Africans, a lot of Africans, think that their interests and the interest of the US government is the same. But they think that their interest and the interest of Europe is the same. They think that their interest and the interest of these billionaires who are robbing them daily for their labor, to the consumer goods that we consume, to the theft of people's raw materials, we think that our interests, the people who are benefiting from this exploitation, is the same. And so if you think like that, then you can never have an African perspective. because you've adopted the interest of your enemy and made them your own. And you see the people who are against you as your friends, and the people who are for you, you see as the enemy. Malcolm told us about this, and he gave us some kind of rules of thumb. He said, when they say look left, look right. When they say look up, look down, you might not be exactly right, but you're going to be headed in the right direction, because you can't agree with the people who are oppressing and exploiting you. So I think that that's the first thing, is let's define ourselves. And then we can define our interests, and then we can develop a perspective that's useful. It's real important that your perspective is useful, because it has to help you pursue those interests. And Babose said something that's really, really, really important, because we look at these things emotionally, especially when we're looking at these crying babies holding their teddy bears on a tarmac on the edge of a camp in Poland. You get emotional about these kinds of things. They keep bombarding you with these images of the same building getting blown up. There's one building they blew up every day for a week, the same building, you know, and you get that image over and over and over again, and you gotta feel something. But to understand, you have to look at what are the forces at work. What are the forces that are in operation? And what are these forces seeking to achieve? This thing right now in Russia, and I'm saying this thing in Russia, not the thing in Ukraine. This thing right now in Russia is about the US trying to gain control of the Russian economy. It's about them trying to stop the competition with the Russian production so they can dominate the markets of Europe, particularly with things like oil and natural gas, but it's all kinds of things that Europe gets from Russia. So the US wants control of those markets, and they want control of Russia as a market. They want access to those raw materials that exist inside of Russia. So we know that in part of this is about capitalism doing what capitalism do. Is dominate the world so that they can control the human and material resources in order to benefit the United States. And that brings us to this conflict in the Ukraine, because Russia is not only defending its borders against NATO bombs, it's defending its borders against NATO capital, against NATO capitalist interests that seek to dominate the world and to make money off of everybody, including the Russians. So who benefits? Well, the US has sold billions of dollars worth of arms to this Ukrainian so-called fighting force. And I've never seen a fighting force like this in my life. They got brand new, just out the crate, military armaments, and they're handing them out. They want us to believe they're just passing them out willy-nilly to civilians on the street. Here, go fight the Russians. Here, go fight the Russians. Here, go fight the Russians. I don't believe that for 1 minute. I think they know exactly who they're giving them guns to. And I think when this thing with the Russians is over, it's going to be a whole bunch of right-wing, fascist, white folks in the Ukraine with modern US weapons who are not attached to any state, and it's going to become the European Al-Qaeda. That's how it happened in Libya, ain't it? NATO came in there, armed a bunch of thugs, murdered Gaddafi, destroyed Tripoli, destroyed the infrastructure of the country, gained control of the oil and other natural resources and left those people who they created, they called the resistance, armed and dangerous to infiltrate back into the rest of Africa. That's where Boko Haram came from. That's where this so-called ISIS came from. This is how these forces began to spread throughout Africa. And so it's the same thing that's happening in the Ukraine. We're gonna have to deal with these armed Nazis after this is over, because they're not going into Europe, they're gonna send them into Africa. They're gonna join NATO and come into Africa to continue this US military adventure. US bases. These are all aspects of the same thing. It includes that local police officer in the cities that we live in. These are all part of one military apparatus. And you see them in the streets of Baltimore as police officers and National Guardsmen and state troopers, but you see them in Africa as Afrikan, the African command of the US military apparatus. You see them now in South America. You know, NATO's in South America. You know, NATO got military operations in South America. So what we're faced with is one, it's kind of good. It's one enemy. He have a whole lot of different faces. And it is a he. It is a he. He have a whole lot of different faces, but they're all an attempt to militarize the process of keeping us exploited and oppressed, to keep us from rebelling, to keep us from organizing, to keep us from seizing a control of the means of production, especially at home in Africa. This is what they're doing, and this is what they do, and this is what they've always done. And this is why I tell people, this ain't nothing new. This is what they've always done. How you think we got here? It's the same countries that are in the European Union that sat down in 1891 and divided the African continent among themselves and colonized Africa. These are the same countries before that that came to Africa to steal us in our millions, to attack our societies and to disperse us around the world. So these experiences we're having now, looking at Europe from a distance and seeing war brewing up there, that's not new to us. We've seen this all before. We've experienced it before. The only difference is now, when these European powers fight each other, it's nuclear arms on both sides of the border. That's a big difference. It's nuclear arms on both sides of the border. I say all the time, and it's been said in many ways before, but when America get a cold, we get Ebola. When America gets the sniffles, we get AIDS. When America gets a headache, we get a bullet in the head. This is how it works. And I can't tell you exactly how it's going to play out, but I can guarantee you, whatever they lose, whatever is taken from them, whatever is destroyed in Europe as a consequence of what's happening right now, is going to be paid for in African blood, because they come into us to make up the difference. They come into Africa to take the diamonds and the gold and the bauxite and the uranium so they can rebuild Europe. We don't understand. This is how Europe got built in the first place. That's what NATO was set up for, to rebuild Europe. How'd they do it? They came to Africa and they stole all of our resources. They exploited our labor and they used that to rebuild Europe after World War I. You think they ain't gonna do it again? So we have to be clear. We don't need to have our perspective being Euro-centered. We need to decenter Europe. We know what's going on there. We understand it. We see NATO and their machinations, but we look at it different because NATO has always had its guns and armaments pointed at us. Now they turned around and they pointing them at each other. It's a different view we have right now. And I think we really need to be trying to take advantage of it as a people, because we have opportunities now to free ourselves, to get rid of Afrikan in Africa while NATO's busy in Europe. We can get Afrikan out of Africa. We can get the US and their economic interests out of Africa. This is really the best thing you can do to help the people of the Ukraine and help the people of the Soviet Union by having a unified socialist Africa that stands up for the rights of all human beings. That's the greatest thing we can do for anybody, anywhere that's fighting a struggle for socialism, is that we fight that struggle where we are for socialism as a part of this worldwide thing. So from the revolutionary perspective, I know it sounds kind of harsh, but it's true. Imperialist wars can be turned into wars of liberation against imperialism. And we have to seize every opportunity to turn these wars that imperialism wages into wars against imperialism, because we know we have to defeat imperialism in order to get our freedom. And we have to defeat imperialism to be of any assistance to the people of Russia and the people of Ukraine. So that's our perspective.
All right. Thank you, bro. Thank you very much for that that perspective. I want to announce that the party that was missing from the panel is with us now, Brother Dhoruba Bin Wahad, and we're going to come to him, but first let's go to Brother Babose and to follow up with what you have said, Brother Rafiki. Or maybe this is going to be a GC version of, you know, when I say GC, you know what I mean, dude. I know, Brother Babose, you know what I mean. Because Brother Rafiki seemed to, he said, what is he talking about, GC? What is he? What, I'm kidding.
I know it better than you know.
I'm kidding. Okay, Brother Babose, you know, I love you, brothers, man. So, you know, let me get it from you. You're muted.
Again, thank you. Let me start by saying that Russia and Ukraine, the people of Russia and Ukraine, are the targets of Western imperialism. It is no coincidence that the CIA, right after World War II, had a project in Ukraine called Project Aerodynamics in the 1950s. This project was responsible for recruiting nationalists and Nazis, including Nazis like Mykola Lebed, who killed over tens of thousands of Poles and Jews. And it is this project that helped to get us where we are today. It is this project that started to build an infrastructure and a government that would eventually come to power in Ukraine. You know, a lot of people say that Russia have overthrown a democratically elected president, but when this man came to power in 2014, he was placed in power. There was no election. The elections were held in 2019, not 2014. So an easy way of looking at this is what Sekou Touré talks about when he talks about the people class and the anti-people class. This class is created by imperialism for imperialism, and it includes neocolonialism. The new colonial administrators for the same old colonial countries. It's also instructive that we realize that NATO was founded in 1949. But a lot of people look at NATO as a European organization based in Europe. Even Donald Trump, who don't have too much credibility or sense, used to say, we should get out of NATO because Europe isn't paying the right price. They're not paying for the protection that they're getting from us. The fact is, in 1949, NATO was created in Washington, D.C. And it was created in Washington, D.C. to protect capitalism in Europe. It was actually an aspect of what they call USECOM, the United States European Com, or Command. NATO have also worked with a couple of other arms of the United States government that we may be aware of. Arms such as NED, the National Endowment for Democracy. The National Endowment for Democracy contends, when it was founded, that they could do today openly what the CIA used to have to do on the cover in the past, and they do it. NED is the arm that financed counter-revolutionary movements, counter-revolutionary social groupings to help to overthrow socialist movements around the world, as Venezuela. Along with that, of course, you have the African Command. And NATO have helped the African Command. Actually, the first place that the African Command went into performance was in Libya. And it was a NATO war in Libya. The war in Somalia was a NATO war in Somalia. So when people say, well, why are we worried about what's happening? We ain't got nothing to do with it. It doesn't affect our people. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. The people in Somalia is our people. The people in Libya is our people. The Ghanaians and Nigerians and Jamaican students who are being thrown off of buses and asked to walk at gunpoint to the border, to Poland, where they can't get in because of xenophobia. Those are our people. This war affects our people. And again, Secretary is correct. It is the anti-people class versus the people class, us. I think that there's a couple other aspects of this that some people have thrown around. Folks have said that this is a theater where the USSR can actually try to use new weapons. Currently, there are supersonic bombs that only 3 countries have. The US, USSR, well, not USSR, but Russia and China. Russia tested these weapons in Syria. Who knows where the US have tested them, but they're not as efficient. They admit, the US, that their supersonic weapons is not as efficient and effective as Russia's and China. That's one tangential piece of information that we ought to look at and check out. Another piece is that currently the United States have 39 countries around the world, over 2/3 of the world population, on the sanctions in one form or the other. 39 countries, including China, including Russia, including, of course, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Zimbabwe. We have to look at this, because these countries that were at first on the sanctions by the US, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, were countries that could feel the effect of sanction. And sanctions is a war on the people. It's a war crime. It's starving the people from the necessities of life, food, medicine, the natural necessities to live a life. However, they have placed sanctions on Russia, and they may have shot themselves in the foot. Because one, the Russian economy is not as dependent on the US as the other countries that are on the sanction. Russia sells less than 7% of their oil to the United States. So, hey, if they sanction it, what does that mean? Nothing. But these sanctions are what they call multi-territorial. So while the United States pass a law, they enforce it in countries all over the world that are allied to them. So when they say sanctions on Russia, they're not just saying, we're not trading with Russia. They're also saying, you can't trade with Russia because you're our ally. Now, there's a country in Europe who has leased 521 airplanes, including Airbuses, to Russia. What are they going to do? They're now sanctions. They cannot go and get their planes. They can't fly their planes out of Russia. They're in effect bankrupt because of this. Not only are they bankrupt, it's not because Russia won't pay them. Russia said, hey, we'll pay them for this month. We paid them last month. But even if Russia paid them, they couldn't transfer the money through the SWIFT, the international banking system. So the money becomes worthless to them. It's affecting them, not Russia. And that's just one item, one case. What about wheat? Most of the wheat in the world comes from Russia and Ukraine. For people who already is starving, this makes it even worse. So you begin to see that there are people in the United States who this is not affecting. But for most of us, it's affecting us. It's like what an old brother told me once. He said, for some people, it's lunchtime. But for most of us, it's just plain old 12 o'clock. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So when you look at this situation, again, look at all of these aspects and look at the possibilities and project what is the possible outcomes. And of course, most important, where does it leave us? Thank you.
Thank you, my brother. Very good. We'll be coming back to you. Be prepared for some questions. We now have Brother Dhoruba with us, and I'm going to call on him next. But first, let me see if I can set up something, because I know he's done quite a bit on the history of the European situation, the invasive tendencies of Western Europe going towards Eastern Europe, especially Russia. A lot of people in the world don't know why the Russians are so nervous about these Western Europeans and NATO, especially with their bases. They even have them now in the Baltic. I'm not so sure if they're military bases, but the Baltic, some Baltic states that they are part of the EU and the trade system, and they're actually consider Russia an enemy. So Russia has a right to be nervous that if they have people who consider them enemies on their borders and they're NATO countries, and they have base, and then you're coming all around, going all the way to the Black Sea, something is coming up and you don't even know what it is. I think Putin has asked, well, what do you mean with all this expansion of NATO? There's a history of Western Europeans attacking Russia. Let me see if I can expand, not me, but I'm going to see if I can get Brother Dhoruba to expand on some of that and give us his opinion or perspective of as an African, of what is going on here. Brother Dhoruba, are you with me?
He's muted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, my brother. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
First of all, thank you.
Yeah, if you come a little closer, the mic.
Yeah, I said, first of all, thank you,
okay.
Babose.
Yes, sir.
You know, I think both the sister Jacquie Luqman. I mean, much could not be added to her overview and the emphasis that she placed in each particular era along the way. I mean, shout out Jacquie, Madam Luqman. That was quite impressive. I guess my video is coming on.
Oh, there you go.
That was quite impressive, sister. I hope we got that recorded, right? and then out of the dugout came my brother Rafiki. You know, have no delusions and expectations of these people who have profited and empowered themselves off of our blood and off of our weaknesses and our strengths. So, you know, you could best believe that living in a consumer society, that the ramifications for us is going to be enormous, especially as the dollar suffers, as there's a possibility that that an alliance with Russia and China could lead to a whole new paradigm of devaluation of the petrodollar, and together they could demand payment of the gas and oil that's coming out of the former Soviet stands, in Central Asia, through the northern, what they call the new Silk Road route. So, the Russians have no choice but to turn away. And I think the brother that emphasized, the brother Babose Shango, shout out my brother, because he went into the devious nature of the SWIFT code and international finance capital, and how they can manage to bamboozle and swindle entire nations into submission and into taking positions, and the world has been divided into what I call new age imperialism, globalization, in which certain nations are relegated to be the source of the materials, and other nations to be the manufacturers, and then the elites, the former imperial nations, then become the beneficiaries of the goods and services that are distributed as commodity to workers who can't even afford it, so they go into debt. So, I shout out my brother for pointing that out. So, what is going to happen now? How things proceed. I know people are moaning about the rise of gasoline and the prices for that, and I anticipate things are going to get worse. But when we left off about why Russia views the Ukraine in such it seems implacable opposition, and is that because, as the brother was about to point out, Russia has been the subject of two massive invasions, one by Napoleon, and it was the Russian winter that it basically forced Napoleon to turn back away from Moscow, and Russia was spared conquest, and then by Hitler, who ravaged the country and taking the country back from the Nazis, killed approximately 27 million Russians. And they have never forgotten that price, and nor should the world forget that price they paid. In all candor, they were the ones they were the victors of World War II. American total casualties for the whole of World War II was 365,000. So we need to understand why the Russian state, why the Russian mentality is such that they don't want armies, hostile, militarized territories on their frontier. And now in the age of technology and the use of missiles and drones. You know, they're extremely vulnerable. I think we should recall the response to the United States under JFK when the Russians placed the medium-range ballistic missiles in Cuba. The U.S. went buck wild, you see, and it's been said that that was the first time that the world teetered on the brink of nuclear war. So, if the United States would react to a foreign power putting weapons of mass destruction and military weapons on their frontier, you know, the response, for the jingoistic response from both the left and the right in the United States, both Republicans and the Democrats, would be
We lost Brother Dhoruba. Seems like we lost him. Yeah. Brother Heru. Yeah, anyone hearing me?
Yeah.
Yes, Baba, we can hear you.
Okay.
We can
Okay,
hear
great. Yeah. We've lost Brother Dhoruba, but there were some, you know, he's dealing with some aspects of what's going on there with NATO and its borders and what the U.S. might have done had they had similar military, I guess, threats on their borders. How they might have reacted as and we know in history that they did react when the Cuban Missile Crisis is one of those. I want, you know, I wanted to, for him to, I think I heard him discuss on this matter of the threats to Russia, the nervousness that Russia has regarding Western Europeans. You know, Russia, the Slavs, you know, what the Western world wants now is for the Slavs to slavishly, you know where that word came from? They still disrespect these people. And they go down there and they promise, like they promised the Ukrainians, a young, you know, politician, his first time in politics, probably has no idea about the history of NATO and all that. He's an entertainer, and you know, people telling him all kinds of stuff, and he's like, you know, the great British hero, and using his terminology about, you know, let everybody die in Ukraine. What will they be dying for? You know, people, we don't need some of our folks here to understand there's some history here, and we as a people should make it known to the people in governing here that we shouldn't be part of this. You know, you've got your issue, and we seeing ourselves in danger because of where you're going. There's history here, and we're not ignorant of it. Now there's history where Russia was invaded every single century, starting from the 16th century. I mean the 17th century. They were invaded by Poland. Poland actually occupied Russia. Poland, it was a strong nation at that time, actually occupied Russia. In the 18th century, Sweden invaded Russia. They consider themselves Western Europeans. They invaded Russia. Russia has a right now. The Finnish border with Russia is part and parcel of invasive forces coming from that western part of Europe. And it's the reaction to that made the Finnish border now in a different place. At that time, Sweden dominated that area. Now, you have in the 19th century, you got Napoleon. The 20th century, you got again Western Europeans, Germans, Habsburg people, Hungarians, all those people. I mean, they invaded Russia. And now, why shouldn't they be nervous about these people coming at their borders again? Militarily, it's a question maybe of nationhood, it's a question of ethnicity, but maybe it's a question of them being Slavs. You know, we want them to slavishly deal with us. Whatever we tell them to do, they need to be doing. We want to incorporate our kind of economy on them, our kind of financial system on them, so that their resources, human as well as material, should be ours. We're going to tell them why it is ours, because you got to use our money and you can't trade with anything but, as they're saying right now, take away, you know, here you have Biden telling people that the Russian ruble has dropped 40% and is worth less than a US penny. In other words, they're bankrupt. What does that mean? Russia can't buy anything anywhere? Our people need to know that when we're hearing crap like this, we need to respond. They've been using Black people in this country, and I'm saying the Democrats especially, for their own aims. We need to get with it. And still, our people are being killed in the streets. Still, when things are happening in African countries, we're not responding. And I say we, I'm talking to our Black representatives in Congress. Some of them, they say things, but it's not for us. They're, in my opinion, I must say, they're just covering up wherever they need to cover up where they sit. You know, because they have to have these positions. We've got more Black people in Congress today, more Black governors, mayors, people in power, and we're still having these issues of no Black power for the people. So we need to get somewhere with this. We need to wake up our folks. And I'm saying this because, I don't know. I mean, is something coming up here? This may be from the technical aspects of things. Okay. I thought that was our technical person dealing with me here. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I went off on a rant there. Please excuse me. You know,
rant more.
This kind of stuff just gets me off, you know, because some people think we're foolish, we're stupid, we're idiots. We have no sense of analysis. We can't analyze anything that's happening around us. I don't know if you remember, there was a time when we had a representative in United Nations who was Black, and he made some decision to go and talk to the Palestinians. And there were people saying, why, actually saying that this Black man, what's he doing talking to Palestinians? He was there as US ambassador and couldn't even talk to the Palestinians about peace. And that was his job. Because he was Black, they put pressure on the government at the time, which I think was Carter. It's crazy. Black people still don't have power.
That same former U.S. representative at the United Nations
Yeah.
is now currently the civilian U.S. military civil liaison for Africa.
No.
So that same Andy Young.
Oh my gosh. No.
He's the one that goes to these African states with these generals to strike these deals that get AFRICOM and AFRICOM bases across the African continent. And we, I mean, it's not that, I sometimes wonder the same thing, you know, because I was told that if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, and you keep getting the same results, that's a problem, that you have a problem. And we seem to have this problem, especially with the Democratic Party. They have never been on our side. They have, every single Democrat voted for that $758 billion military expropriation this year, last year, the year before that, the year before that, and they will continue to do it every year in perpetuity. All of them support the Zionist state of Israel. You have to support the Zionist state of Israel to get elected and be a member in good standing of the Democratic Party. But our people have been convinced that there is no better way. There is no other alternative. There is nothing other than what we are experiencing right now. And so the best thing I can do is look out for myself and don't worry about changing the world that I live in. And this is the kind of thinking that perpetuates the system that exists. Because the enemy doesn't only exploit and oppress us, they also confuse us. And it's this confusion among our people that we need to get by. You say it looks like we don't know how to make an analysis. And you can't make an analysis if you don't know your own interests. Right. You can't analyze the situation so that you can do better if you don't know what you need to do better. So this is the kind of, this is why these issues come up. A lot of times for us, it's not necessarily about, I'm not trying to dismiss or make light of people dying in war. I'm not trying to do that. But for us, a lot of times, these issues come down to our thinking, our mentality, our sense of self, our identity, our love for our own people, and our ability to figure out what's best for us. And this fighting through this confusion is what keeps us back. And what we fail to understand is that each of us as individuals, we can't beat this confusion. We can't compete with NBC or ABC or CBS or CNN, or none of them. We can't compete with them. But the only way we can fight this confusion is to get organized, is to come together, is to unite ourselves as a force in and of itself, standing in opposition to these forces that are doing these things to us all over the world. So, and until we do that, we're gonna get fools like Andy Young, playing middleman for Uncle Sam.
But he's not a fool, he's making money.
He is a fool because what
I'm saying it's about what you said. It's about personal gain.
Personal gain, yeah.
Yes. And it's not about the masses. Look what I just wrote in there.
Yeah,
that's where we
Our
are.
issue as masses, we have no sense of who we are. We don't know we are Africans. Therefore, we don't know how to connect to our root and understand what's really going on there. I'm saying, I sent you all some things like South Africa has a relationship with Russia where 14% of their annual gross product of apples they sell to Russia. So look what's going to happen with them. Same thing, Nigeria buys its wheat from Russia. So now they're not going to be able to get bread. You know what I'm saying? We got to look at how it's affecting our folk economically. I'm not on either one side. What I'm concerned about is as they go forward, they're going to end up conscripting some of our children to fight and go over there and die. What? I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Yes, Mama Tanda.
I'm sorry.
No. Listen, that was a good intervention.
Yeah.
Let me say, Babose, you have something to say?
I wanted to add that, Afrikan currently has some 29 military bases on our continent, in 13 countries on our continent. And for us to not understand that this is just the beginning, that they're going for all of the countries on our continent. And yes, and the young becomes a useful tool. But we must see him as a neocolonial agent, because that's what he is. And for us to move to save our continent, for us to unite our continent, we have to fight neocolonialism both here and on the continent. It is neocolonialism on the continent that allows those 39 bases. And they're more standing in line, waiting to be asked and given a little bit of money so that America can place some more bases. So I think that we have to fight neocolonialism.
Agreed, my brother. Baba Congo has his hand up, but first, I think Sister Jackie looked like she was leaning forward to say something there. So, what do you have for us, sister? I'll come to you after Baba Congo.
All right.
Well, I really want to, I think, make clear that the reason we don't know these things, and this is something I've had a hard time struggling with myself, because I do have to remember that there was a time when I didn't know what I know now, right? Somebody had to be patient with me and get me there. I just happened to be one of those, incessantly curious, voracious readers that you peel back the layer a little bit. I am going to go all in. So I didn't need a whole lot of guidance, but a lot of our people do. And it's very important to understand that not only do we live in a country that is probably the most propagandized group of people in the world here in the United States, but our people in particular are the most propagandized people in this country. You see, because anytime the Democratic Party, and I'm so glad that Rafiki brought them up, that nest of vipers brought them up, anytime they will base an entire strategy on blaming Black people for why Hillary Clinton lost an election to someone she should never have lost to, Donald Trump, and saying that those people are they were duped by Russia. The narrative that Black people are literally so stupid that we could not understand that some Facebook memes with Bernie Sanders in a bikini, some shoe ads, and some other social media posts that were actually distributed, most of them after the election, and most didn't have anything to do with the election. These people crafted a narrative that basically said that Black people were so stupid that all it took was a few Facebook ads for us to either not vote for Hillary Clinton, to vote for Donald Trump, or to not vote at all. And when you understand that this is part of a larger demonization of Black radicals with the smear of the Red Scare, when you realize that so many Black people now are actually afraid of being called radicals. I mean, it is a struggle in my own church. I'm glad that my pastor's radical because it is a struggle among people of faith to revive that radical tradition in our communities of faith toward the radical Palestinian Jesus. You know, just mentioning that Jesus was Palestinian is too much for some folks. So we have a captive and captured population of folks, politically, intellectually, in this country, where people would much rather buy into hustle culture, buy into Black capitalism, buy into anything where they can get a few extra coins, because the prospect of confronting and changing the system is, quite honestly, is too terrifying for them, because they're afraid of the state. I think our people truly are afraid of the state, and they've been made to be afraid of the state by that propaganda from the state. But we also, I think, have to remember that nobody does election meddling like the United States. I say of this whole Russia Gate business, if the best Vladimir Putin could do was to throw up some Facebook ads, then he is a rank amateur in the pantheon of people who meddle in elections, because it was Bill Clinton who sent an entire team to Moscow to manage the re-election campaign of Boris Yeltsin, who was not going to be re-elected in Russia because people hated him so much. And when he finally had to step down, because he was still terrible and the people still hated him, after he was re-elected with the help of the United States, who did Yeltsin appoint to take his place? Then Prime Minister Vladimir Putin. So when people are talking about Putin is evil and Putin did this and there's collusion with Putin, if people don't believe that what is happening in Ukraine is the fault of the United States, then look at Russia and understand that Vladimir Putin being president of Russia is also the fault of the United States. Maybe it will be easier for people to start there, but the United States and US imperialism and NATO and EU, their hands are all over the place. And we don't know these things because we are the most propagandized people in this country, and that's for a reason. So I appreciate the opportunity to unpeel these things on these kinds of panels, because people aren't going to get it anywhere else.
I agree, my sister. We see that all the time. Our folks are highly distracted, and they know how to distract us. Just take a look at the Fox network and the programs they have on there, and I guess they're trying to deculturize or enculturize us into Black people who are just buffoons. But anyway, it's part of the process. We're paying more attention to the statistics in basketball and football, and we're paying attention to what is happening to our people around the world. I'm one of those people who is out there talking about West Papua and what is happening to Black folks in West Papua. There are very few Black people that I have spoken to who know what West Papua is all about, the history of it, or even they've not even heard of it. Black people are in the Pacific, and there are a whole lot of them are there. The point is, we don't get the news. They're right now in West Papua. The Indonesians are carrying out a war against these people who want to be independent, who want to be free. Their country was invaded by the Indonesians. We don't hear anything about that from the US corporate press. Why? They've got one of the largest mines in West Papua that is making high profits for a US company. So we don't hear about that. They don't care about us. We don't get that in the news. If you don't search for it, you're not going to find it. And I hope some of you will help.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir.
This is Arturo.
Yes,
I want
sir.
to salute everybody.
Hello, Arturo.
All these big intellectuals of the community and organizers, and I'm glad to see Rafiki and Ambuchi, which are people that I know for many years, and they've been out here in struggles. I am very happy to see them, all of them. All of you, sister, you're a great talker. I love your talk. It was analysis of the whole thing, and it was very good. I haven't heard anything about China. China is an important player, even though they're not involved in the invasion or anything like that, but China is an important player in this thing. Because what is happening is that China has become quite a power, economic power, and also military, if you want to say.
Yes.
And the US leader of this situation, basically, is not necessarily Ukraine, it's the United States, who is using the Ukrainian people to delimitate, to try to get at Russia. They want to eliminate Russia so they can go after China. That's what the thing is, because
you are absolutely right.
China has become such a powerful country now that the US economically kills the United States. Basically, it's not at the level anymore. And so forth. The only thing the United States has is a great army. Yeah. It's an army, and they have nuclear weapons and all these things that they can probably fight. But they don't produce anything in here. They don't produce anything in here. They don't create the kinds of jobs that we need to create here, and so forth. So it's really something to think about. So we need to think about what is happening in this world. China is moving around the world now, building relationships with a number of countries with their plan, and that the United States is losing their relationship with people in the world.
Right.
That's what's really going on. And the two areas that are very important, no question, to the capitalists is the natural resources that Africa has and Latin America. That is a very important thing. And they are fighting over that. They're fighting who's going to control the resources of the world, basically. That's what the big fight is about at the end, because the earth, the resources of the earth are limited. They're not forever. So the ones who fight and control the resources are going to be the ones who control earth. That's the situation. That's something you have to think about it. So basically, that's something that we need to think about it. This fight that Russia is going with Ukraine. Let me tell you, the United States have invaded more people, more countries than any other country in the world. They have invaded, and all of you said that basically, and so forth. They have exploited the resources of many places, and they're still fighting to keep those controls. Europe is like a colonial. The United States control Europe. Europe don't make any decisions unless you start it. So this is the thing. The United States is controlling Europe. We are here in a situation where, in this fight, the media completely controlling the minds of our people, all our people in the United States. That's what they're doing. That's what they've done. It's incredible. The media has become such an arm that can control the minds of everywhere. Everybody's against Russia. Nobody likes Russia. It's an incredible thing.
You're fading out, Brother Arturo.
Nobody likes Russia. What the hell is this? I thought this country was about peace.
All right.
Basically, what we're talking about is these people are not the people. I'm not talking only the president. The people of the United States are paying for this. Our taxes are the ones that are paying for this crime that is going on, basically. And we have to watch out because we are in a dangerous moment at this time. The nuclear war can come at any time. You have no idea. We're talking here, we're doing this, we're discussing, but a nuclear war can come up and eliminate all of us. All of us. You don't take seriously this thing. I'm glad that we are discussing. I'm glad because we are Black. Because we are Black, we have a lot of sensitivity about oppression and racism and discrimination. That's naturally with us. That is something that we never say, God damn, the racists are getting up again. You know, and this was happening look what is happening even to the people who live, Black people who live in Ukraine. They're getting persecuted. Indians, Blacks, everybody who lives there is getting persecuted. This is an important question to think about. We have to think about the resources of Africa, the resources of Latin America, which are immense. And this is what they're fighting about. They want to beat, they really want to beat Russia, make it weak, and then go after China.
Yeah,
That's
well,
their
it's
goal.
imperialism.
That's their goal. That's imperialism. So,
yes.
compañeros, I'm glad we're talking, but we need to talk also about what we're going to need to do.
All right, all right.
Because the question here is this. We are talking. What do we need to do? The peace movement is dead.
Okay.
The peace movement in this country is completely dead. There's no peace movement here. I mean,
Baba Congo, Baba Congo has had his hand up, and you well,
I want
right in there. So he might have had the answer to that.
Okay, he might have the answer. Okay. It's a pleasure seeing you. I'm glad to see Paul Humphrey.
Yeah, brother Paul. Yeah, he has his hand up as well. So
adios, amigos.
Okay. Yes, Baba Congo.
The history of the United States with its manifest destiny.
Yes.
It conquered the West. It conquered the North, South of the Americas and the Caribbean. And it's gone over to Africa, and it has invaded more countries than anyone else, any of the major powers. I would say most of us are born in the 1940s and 50s. And I think there's the conflicts that the United States have caused have killed more people in my lifetime than anybody else. The U.S. pushes that they do not want BDS for Israel, but here I would say in a 1 or 2 month period, they got BDS for Russia that has invaded one country. That it's for its own survival or security. And anyway, we have to stop the African command badly. We have to support all I mean, we have to, here's a country that tells people who's the president of Venezuela, and not the people, and it does the same thing with Haiti. It does the same thing with Honduras, and in its past has done it with Chile, Brazil, and everywhere else. It's bad when a country has a history of killing more people, and then when Russia start killing people, they say, "Oh no, you can't stop them," and then you have to do this, and this against them. And the United Nations, the OAS, all those places are, to me, have lost their credibility because they do not work the way I consider or how I interpret that they should be working. As Black people, we have to get our own communication and our own, so that people can hear this perspective that I've heard tonight, and spread it. And we're spreading the truth. I mean, everything we said here we can factually back it up. Anyway, it's sad. I'm glad that everybody's here. I'm glad that you could be doing other things on a Friday night, but I think this panel is a great panel, and I'm happy to thank you and welcome you to the African Freedom Forum. Anyway, that's all I have to say for now.
Okay, my brother.
Peace.
We'll go to Brother Paul since he has his hand up. What are you saying, Brother Paul?
Well, one of the things I think is very important to bring out is the fact that you've had the Biden administration saying that it could not meet any of the major promises that it made to the African American community and the working community in this country because they didn't have money for it. But yet we're watching him and Congress find tens of billions of dollars to put into this war. I mean, and so the question we have to ask is, wait a minute, you say you don't have money for people to go to college for 2 years, but yet you can put more than that amount of money into a war at the last moment. What about that? I mean, this whole thing around this situation that's happening in Ukraine has a direct impact on our community.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have a government who says that it doesn't have the money.
Mm-hmm.
That's our needs, but it can go halfway around the world and put money into an unjust war inside the Ukraine, in reference to the fact that the Ukraine was the one who created the war. They created the conditions for the war. And Russia was very clear. They say, do not bring Ukraine into NATO and do not bring them into the European Union, and we'll go back across the border. But Biden has said everything but that. Yet he's acting like it's Russia's problem, that the reason why this war is going on, that the US has no role to play. So I would suggest that as we talk to our community, we should really highlight the broken promises made during the campaign of Biden. And also the fact that Biden made a big deal about how he's going to choose a Black woman to be on the Supreme Court. The last Black person that he helped get on the Supreme Court was Clarence Thomas. And what did that do for the Black community? So, I mean, here it's not that he got somebody Black, but somebody that in fact is in favor of doing what's right for the Black community. And he never committed himself to that. And so, I mean, Clarence Thomas was made a member of the Supreme Court when the Democratic Party was the majority of the Senate and Biden was the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. We need to remind people of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how is it all of a sudden Biden has changed his colors? They're saving our community. He's not. That's it.
Yeah, okay,
Great
my brother.
program, great seminar.
Yes, that perspective is that's a good injection into the patient. Seriously, you've brought up some very good points. And, this is, Biden, right now, there's a whole lot of folks out there, Black folks I'm talking about, who think that Biden is our hero. And just because he says that, Putin is now our enemy. Just like when, listen, they're carrying out the same process they were carrying out against Trump, and he still beat the hell out of them for 2016. And it's the same kind of stuff. Well, why are you paying so much attention to this one person? Because you can detract from the real history, the real issues. And this is why you just have one, what do you call it, demon. You can detract from the real issues. And Black folks are falling into it. They're being sucked up with this vacuum of corporate propaganda. Let me mention that somebody's saying we need to have a media or meet it regarding, and I know the sister, Sister Jacquie Luqman, she mentioned the Black Power Media, and we have a YouTube link to it in the chat if you want to know what the Black Power Media is all about, and they discuss a lot of these issues. So you know, that's one person, that's okay, or one group of people doing something. We're trying to do the same thing here with the Freedom Friday Forum. We're on twice a month, but that's not even enough. That's not enough to counter what is coming at us every single day from the corporate press or the corporate media. I mean, and our folks, it's, you know, it's like everything else. It's what they're doing to us is what they do to us with the advertising for Pepsi, Coke, and McDonald's. We're probably the people who eat more at McDonald's than anybody else. And we're falling for this stuff. It's another thing like that. Daily. I mean, I'm looking at it and I can't believe it. How could you think that the one person could be responsible for all that went down? Anyway, I'm speaking now of black folks need to get in. This is why we have this program tonight, because we need to find a way to have black folks thinking, you know, in a different direction, thinking more of themselves and what's affecting them and not what's affecting the Democratic Party and who's in it. So if there's anybody else need to, then we can, I may ask a
I've had
question.
my hand up for the longest.
Oh, Sister Tenda, you know, you're not, I'm not seeing you from my screen, so I didn't see that. Okay.
All right, okay, I'll take it. Let me show
Yeah,
you.
Mama Tendai, go right ahead.
I was just going to say I'm not on the Democrat or the Republican side.
Okay.
Because we can go back with Reaganomics and all of that sort of thing when they dealt with regime change. That was the conversation that existed at that time. All I'm saying is, as an African people, and as Brother Arturo was saying, I had put in the chat that this appeared to me to be a remaking of 1884, 1885. Okay, when they divided up Africa, it's the European countries, it's all of those countries who consider themselves not necessarily European, but they consider themselves so-called white.
Mm.
Okay, and the dominance, and I do understand because I'm a historian about the Slavic nations where original slaves came from, which is why the name Slav in there, and I had put that in there too. But I'm saying, when I made the mention about the involvement of the African countries and how they were going to be effective, what I was really trying to say is we have to look at all of them, because Russia, United States, and the European and NATO and all of those folk, as well as China, are all imperialists, and everybody, they all want to control the world. The resources of the current planet are in Africa, as Brother Arturo said. So whoever, they have been controlling it. But little by little, our people, some of our people are becoming aware, and they're beginning to do some things basically because survival has required it. So as I was saying, even though the Swiss, you know, they're keeping all of that going. When I said South Africa, for example, what they were doing is going to affect Nigeria because they import their wheat from Russia to make their bread. So we have to begin to look at all of these things in terms of what I meant by us understanding that we are Africans, looking at as a people, how are we being affected, or how will we be affected, so that we can put the proper things in place to counteract it, not just for our survival, but for our growth and our complete and total independence.
And hold on, and why?
Wait a minute, this my son is sitting here. You know, he's an Garveyite over here, sitting here too. He's the young one who wants to start a podcast.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Hey, great.
There you go. That's
He wants to do a podcast.
we're talking about information, getting to our folks. The podcast, yes, indeed.
So
but the reason why we got there in the first place is because why? Because the IMF and the World Bank won't let Nigeria grow its own wheat.
Well, yeah. And then I'm saying not only that, they only have one vote in the European Common Market Code. They can't even control the price of the goods they export. So, you know, it's understanding all of those kinds of things and putting the pieces together so that we can have a plan for our out and our independence. And it is little by little grows the banana. I mean, Marcus Garvey didn't start off with 20 million
but
people.
he doesn't have the people are crazy. QAnon, America is in a much worse place mentally now, because amongst the youth, you can't even get an African American person born in America under the age of 37 to admit that they have any African ties. They say we melanated, or I don't know what part of Africa I'm from. I'm from East side. You know, I might be from Cameroon with mixed with Nigerian. So how do I identify? And I tell them, I say, to move any united body, you have to unite under one front. White people do it all the time. The Jews hate the whites. The whites hate the Irish. But when it comes time for them to unite under one front, under their white privilege, they do it every time.
It's about, and that's why I said we can't, when you were talking about who's in Congress, doesn't matter. Political control is controlled by the economics. So until we have economic independence, and that's what we're working for. We didn't understand that when we tried to liberate the African countries. So they got political independence without economic independence. They got
my sister. You know, my sister, I understand that, but you know, there was I forgot the name of this AU, head of AU, who mentioned to a group of us one day at a luncheon that his experience with one of the Congress people, black from the what do you call it, the BCC, is it?
ABC.
Yeah, that, you know, he was telling him that you know, they're going to do all they can to help Africa and so on, but you know, you guys got to keep China out of Africa. This is a black congressman telling an African, you got to keep China out of Africa. Why do you have to keep China out of Africa? When the Chinese are building just like anybody else, they're coming in there and, oh, okay, we're being exploited. But what have you built in Africa for the last so many years? You got to, that is why we have troops in Africa now. They're trying to, I guess, outflank the Chinese. It's crazy. We've got people in Congress who aren't seeing where Africa ought to be in the world as a developed part of this planet. They're just looking, they're Americans, and so they're just Americans. I mean, I don't know what happens to these folks when they get into Congress. I mean, I know they get all kinds of briefings and all that stuff about the world and all that they have to keep secret, whatever it is. But why are you going to be telling an African person that they shouldn't deal with a group of people who is helping to develop Africa, regardless of how you see it? Now, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about, because if this person, what else is happening to our people?
But isn't that the same thing that's happening on the continent? Okay, when you look at the leaders. So what I'm saying is that same mentality that's part of that capitalistic approach when we deal with capitalism, they're all part of that. And that's part of the imperialist construct. Okay, so they're going to continue to do that. Because as my son was saying, a person under 30 doesn't see himself as an African. They see themselves as multiracial or mixed up or this, that, or the other. They don't deal with their root of who they are. And when I say they don't see themselves as African, what I'm really dealing with is they haven't embraced our culture to understand that we need, that all of these components are necessary for not just Africa's survival, but their own, because they're directly related to it.
But it's just, the irony of it is, these are the things that, you know, we were being taught in the Pan-Africanist community. And it's just so funny how it was, you know, you think it's going in one ear and out the other, but that's all I talk to my friends and my peers about. I said, if you don't know your history, you don't know where you're going, who you are, where you come from, and where you're going, and what to identify with.
Well,
So you don't think that, bro. Ancient Kemet and the technology that can't even be duplicated to this day. They got flying cars technology, but they can't understand how they built the pyramids and the level of technology they was on. But if you don't know that you come from these beautiful things, they just think that their history starts with slavery. And nobody wants to be a slave. Nobody wants to be that party that's been looked down on and oppressed down on.
well, we got to listen carefully to the young voice, because that's part of our problem is we have no control, or we have very little control of what is coming to our young people for education. Yes, Brother Harold?
One thing we had to address is like the role of social media, because what's happened is that the encoding the European history, historical timeline, and the subjugation of African history systems using the media systems. So what is needed is that we need more what's going on tonight, but also you have to figure out how do you infuse that information to other information channels that the youth currently have access to. But and it's also spiritual psychological warfare that's going on as well.
Yeah.
Because if you cut the people off from the spiritual ancestral ties, and then you constantly tie them back to the European way of thinking and culture and spiritual systems, they're cut off in the ancestral realm, flow information to and from.
Which is where is our strength. But that's why I'm saying my son, who we saw here, he's the one who wants to do the podcast for UNIA, because he's a UNIA member, because he's on a couple of podcasts in terms of the social media, and he's trying to educate his peers.
Well,
that's good. That's very good. I think, compañera, I think you should speak in the podcast, because you're really good, and you can educate a lot of us basically out here. There's a lot of things that we need to do, and even though we're talking here, we sort of impotent. We can't change anything. It's kind of difficult. I feel like we can't change. So many things are going, and so many gonna go against us basically, and against the world. And we are the media, like this compañero was saying, the media is incredible. It's an incredible armament. They're using it very well, and we all walk in the streets like we don't understand what's going on. We just say what the media says, and the media is completely controlling our lives basically. And this is something that is the way it's become now. It's a monster. It's really something that we cannot almost control. I mean, corporations control everything, and they decide everything for us. It's something that makes us feel that where are we going? Where are we going to do? What is going to happen to our people? And the possible world war can come, and we're going to be in trouble. Our people are going to be in trouble.
Yeah, but we have to look at both sides of this coin, though, because yeah, it's true we're being bombarded by this media, but it's also true that the media lies.
Yeah,
and that it lies all the time, and that our people do see through some of these lies. I mean, the young people, you don't hear about the resistance. You don't hear about the activity of these young people who understand these systems and are trying to find ways and means to combat them and to wage this struggle. If you'd have read a newspaper in 1839, you would have thought that slavery was an institution that would last forever, that it would never die, that these people are so entrenched that there's nothing these shackled, back-bent slaves could do. But there was things being done. It didn't make the newspaper. And that's what's happening now. There are things being done, but you're not going to see that on CNN. These young people I'm working with today, they far ahead of where I was 40 years ago. They're way beyond my understanding. They're far less tolerant of this system and how it affects their lives than we ever were. They ain't taking some of this stuff. And we need to be aware, because the resistance is real and it's not published. Even the social media, it gives you maybe a glimpse of it. But where's the struggle taking place? In small groups, on side streets, in unknown corners, with agendas that never surface. This is going on not only here, but all over the world. Our people have never, ever conceded or surrendered to this imperialist domination of our lives. We have always resisted. We continue to resist. We think right now we're at war. And the nature of the war is such that we have revolutionary forces throughout the world operating in isolation from one another, not connected in a common struggle, not coordinated politically, economically, or militarily. And we know that this neocolonial system oppresses every African everywhere. Babose is right. It's the anti-people and the people. And you best believe some of them anti-people look just like you. They run in every country on the African continent. And then we get confused because we think neocolonialists are the puppets who are running these governments for imperialism. No, the neocolonialist is the imperialist who hires and manipulates the puppets. So we have to be able to really, because this thing ain't sentimental, you know, in war, people die. So you can't be squeamish about blood because we bleeding. It's a war going on. The question is, how do we organize the fight back? How do we identify the forces among us who are for our liberation? And how do we identify the forces among us who are working for our enemies? And what do we do about it? And it ain't no cut and dry answer. Sekou Touré says you should take those reactionaries and make them work for the revolution. So when it's time to charge the battalion, you take the reactionaries, put them in the front of the line. They can be of some service to the people. It's war. And we have got to be able to understand our place in the war. We also know that it is the internal conditions that are the cause of change. All that stuff that's happening outside all over the world, they're doing that to keep the change from happening, to forestall the collapse that they've already put in place. This is why they're running over here, running over there. Next day is Venezuela, next day is Cuba, next day is Ukraine, next day is Mali, next day is Ethiopia. They're putting all this attention on the outside to take your mind off of what's happening on the inside. Because on the inside, America's falling apart. They just threw $13 trillion to the US corporate system during the time of this pandemic. Where are they getting that money back from? So America's in trouble. And we need to be talking about how to help accelerate the trouble. Not how to get them out of the trouble. We need to intensify the trouble and push them towards their end. And because our freedom is on the other side of their defeat.
And our tax dollars are financing so much of it. Because
Right.
I want you to understand that as the money went, they took several $1 billion out of the COVID relief money to add to the money to go over to Ukraine. So,
Okay.
Absolutely.
yeah.
Babose Shango had his hand up. So let me see. Babose, and then I'll come to you, Paul.
Okay, I think that there's probably two items that's dangling. And I agree with Rafiki. I think that he's really capped it off. But Paul was in Nicaragua just a couple of months ago. And part of the problem in Ukraine is that the nationalists and the Nazis have decided that Ukrainian language should be the only language in Ukraine. And that is why the Donbass region was in turmoil and what they call breaking away. Actually, the Donbass region offered to become autonomous parts of Ukraine. They said that that couldn't work, that that would not work. And I think that that is not necessarily true, because in Nicaragua, we saw working autonomous regions. Actually, on the Caribbean coast where the Africans are, we saw in those areas definite autonomous regions where the people made their own decision without being separate or exiled from Nicaragua. And there's an integral part of that that can show you that the question in Ukraine isn't what they say it is. I think the second point is what Brother Wabe, the brother who got cut off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that he was raising the question of the petrodollar, because the United States gained international control of finances by saying that oil can only be paid for in dollars and basically in US dollars. And so you have the petrodollar, which is backed by nothing. There's nothing backing the petrodollar. Given the situation in Ukraine and for Russia and for China, for many countries that are on the sanction today, they're saying, we don't want the dollar backing our money anymore. We want the gold standard. We want gold backing our money. If that position wins, if the petrodollar loses, that's the doom of America. That's the doom of US capitalism.
Rick.
Thank you for that, my brother. I'm gonna go to Brother Paul. First, I must let you folks know that it's 9:30. It's about the time we usually close, but but no, you know, the technical people have said, you know, we've got some more time. So, but because I want to have Sister Jacqueline give some closing remarks, you know, if you do have it, Sister, you know, but you know, no, we're not forcing the point. We have some people of the panel itself. You know, I don't know if that was your closing remark, Babose Shango, but you know, we'll come back to that before we close. We're gonna have some closing remarks. But let me go to Paul so that we can move on. Brother Paul.
Yes, I found that it's very, very important that we try to connect dots and help our community to understand how those dots are connected. Now, my good brother brought up the issue of the regions inside of Nicaragua and the fact that they have their own autonomy, in which the national government of Nicaragua has to come to those regions and express what they may want to do and have to get the agreement of the regions before they can do it. But then the other thing is that when we talk about connected dots, we have to look at how the United States is operating. He brought up the point about the issue of the petrodollar. The United States went to war twice in the last 25 years over the issue of the petrodollar.
Yep.
Saddam was saying that he would not accept any more US dollars for oil. The United States went to war against Saddam Hussein. He said he only wanted money being paid by the euro dollar. when Muammar Gaddafi said that he wanted to create an African currency, so that in fact the trade done in Africa would have to be done by African currency standards and not by the euro or by the US dollar. France said, oh no, I go to war because you're gonna put me back into being the third world. So, I mean, the point that Babose brought up was very important. But we need to help our community to understand the game as to why the United States does what it does. And also that, in fact, that Rachel Maddow does not tell the truth in any. And
That's true.
And I always say to people in connecting dots, why does a person get paid millions of dollars to read a piece of paper in front of a camera? And obviously, see, that's the kind of money you pay an actor. And I find that the reporters are actors who will at least convince your subconscious of a lie, even if your conscious mind know better. I said many times that people had tears in their eyes watching a TV screen or a movie screen when they know good and well the actor wasn't dying. So these are things that you get people to begin to think that way, then they begin to understand how they're getting played. So I think it's very important that we talk about how to connect dots and get people to see how we get played, you know, and in fact, why does a news reporter need to be paid millions of dollars to read a screen or a piece of paper? And Rachel's always got her paper up front of her, hitting it on her desk as if that's all she's doing is reading a piece of paper. And these are the things that we can help people to understand that they're being shammed, they're being bamboozled, they're being hoodwinked, as Malcolm used to say. And I'll leave the floor to my good sister.
All right, but before I come to you, sister, I want to connect the dots. I slightly disagree with the point that the dollar, the petrodollar, is not backed up by anything. Have you seen the latest aircraft carrier of the United States? Have you seen the exercises that the U.S. fleet did in the China Sea the other day? Do you see the size of the fleet in the Indian Ocean? And you're telling me the dollar is not backed up by anything? Anyway, sister, go right ahead.
That's the power behind the dollar.
This was the U.S. military in Afghanistan for the last 20 years. We were told that we established democracy and had free elections. Yet when the United States announced it was leaving the country, the president went to the bank, stole the money, got on the plane and left.
Yeah.
Supported, he left his country.
Oh yeah.
So
that's interesting, man.
And that they defeated the Taliban. Yet the Taliban had control of the country before the United States could leave the airport. So that in fact, that we were helping the development of the economy of Afghanistan. Yet they're saying that almost half the population have the chance of freezing and starving to death before the end of this winter. So we've been told a lot of lies as to how our military is so powerful. And we find it to be more like a paper tiger than a powerhouse. So yeah, I challenge you on that one with the military.
Yes, Sister Jacqueline.
You know, that's kind of unfair, I think, to have me as the closing comment. But as someone who has, you know, I got into this thing because my husband and I loved politics, and we're both Pan-Africanists, and he was a Garveyite, and I'm an internationalist. And, you know, we got into this thing. We built Luqman Nation because we wanted to give our people the information about politics that we knew they weren't getting on the news outlets that we knew they were watching, because we watched the same one. So we understood from the beginning that this was not going to be sexy, you know. So people who are concerned with the folks that we don't reach, don't be. I mean, we cannot stay in this vacuum, this point of, you know, we're so worried about not being able to compete with the Rachel Maddows and the CNNs and first of all, we don't have their kind of money. Second, we are people who have actual souls. We're not going to lie to our people the way they lie to our people. So I think we have to not be concerned so much with the people who will not accept the truth that we give, because don't we all know that every revolution that has ever occurred, it never was carried by a majority of the people. That's never been true. It's always been a small segment of the people who understood they were oppressed. And once they understood they were oppressed, they wanted to know how they were oppressed, who was oppressing them, what way they were being oppressed, what were the mechanisms that were being used in that oppression, and how they could fight. That's what we need to be concerned about. I ain't never gonna be as sexy as Beyonce, doing, you know, peddling some revolution. That's not gonna happen. So there are a lot of people who will not listen to what I say because, for whatever reason, I don't have the reach, I don't have the followers. We're not as flashy, but the truth is what it is. So we have to stick to the truth. And those people who know that there's something wrong, but they might not be able to quite put their finger on it, they're the ones who will be drawn to it. They're the ones we unite with. They're the ones who will come to a political education on a Saturday afternoon when they could be doing other things. It might be 2 people, it might be 20, but those are the ones we organize, and those are the ones who will quite literally carry the revolution. And I just want to say, people, even though our people are deeply indoctrinated, people also understand that Putin is not keeping them from healthcare, right? People might think that, you know, chasing the bag and they might be able to get a little change if they invest in a little bit more hustle, but people understand generally that it's not Vladimir Putin that's keeping them from having health care in this country. And if you tell those folks, well, you know who has health care? Russians. the Russians pay for the health care of their country. You don't have that. So, you know, we're talking about connecting dots. We can connect dots like that with folks, even people who claim they're not political. This just bread and what do they call it? The bread and butter issues. Xi Jinping is not keeping us from free college tuition. You know, those folks in China, you know what they got? Free college tuition, free or practically affordable. So when you start to connect with people who seem to be ambivalent on politics and these particular issues around, you know, Ukraine and Russia, most of our folks know that the people this country, this government tells them is their enemy. Most of our folks know it's not them. I think our problem is educating our people into the fact that this government, and particularly both parties, the Republican and the Democratic Party, they're our enemies. That's the difficult part. And I get that. But there is no struggle that is easy. Didn't Amilcar Cabral tell us to claim no easy victories? None of this is going to be easy. And I'm 55 years old, and I hope, I actually pray with everything in my being that what people see when they look at what I do, carrying on the work that me and my husband started, what I hope that people see is that I heard y'all. I heard all of you OGs. I heard the Dhoruba Bin Wahad. I heard Paul Pumphrey. I heard Arthur Griffiths. I heard you, Tendai. I heard you, Baba Mosi. I heard you. And what you had to say, the work that you did was enough for me to carry it on. There's going to be somebody 20 years younger than me who's going to say the exact same thing about us. But we can't be defeatist in the face of this war against this enemy that we are in, and not believe that we can win, because I do. I believe we can win. A lot of us are going to fall by the wayside. That is absolutely true. But if this situation in Ukraine does not give us the opportunity that we need to start making these connections and start showing people, see, this is what imperialism does. This is what the US and the EU and the NATO axis of domination has always done. And when you say that and they ask, well, what do you mean has always done? Then you go back and you talk about Haiti and Libya and Syria and Afghanistan and all of those other Black, brown, working class, poor, oppressed, colonized countries that nobody cared about, that the Rachel Maddows and the MSNBC folks and the CNN folks would never mention, but we know. And I also don't get distracted by these conversations about what to call ourselves and who we are, and that, listen, if when you understand that you are a colonized person, you are a part of a colonized people in this country, you're a part of a domestic colony here, and you come from colonized people on the continent, if that does not convince you that you are an African, there really is no conversation I can continue to have with you that is going to help you to that. I hope you get there, but time is short. And we don't have time for a whole lot of side quests and you know, divisive conversations about whether we're African or not. No, we've got a war to win. And I don't think we can do it by, number one, believing that we can go up against this massive propaganda machine and out-propagandize them. I don't think we can do that. But we can outlast them. We can absolutely outsmart them. And we can defeat them with the truth. But we have to understand that we are in a war and believe that we can win. I'm just foolish enough to believe that we can win. And I'm on the side of working class, poor, oppressed, colonized people around the world who have been fighting this imperialist system and who are still fighting this imperialist system until its bloody defeat. That's whose side I'm on. So that's all I got, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my sister. Now you see, now you guys, I saw all you guys rolling your eyes when I said I'm gonna call on Sister Jacqueline to make the closing statement. She's going back, no. What are you saying now?
Great,
if you want to hear some more, I want to tell you, just go to the Black Power Media, the YouTube, and check in the chat and see how you can listen to the sister at least twice a week. I think she's on with that, and she's got a lot more to say. She only gave us a little bit of what she has to say here tonight, and you know, I'm going to be a regular on that show now because you know, I got to get some education. I need to learn a lot more because, you know, that's a teacher right there, I'm telling you. So, all right, guys, folks, if you have any announcements to make, anyone here about something coming up, you can do so at this point. You know, if there's anything on your agenda for the future that you would like to announce, you can do it. You know, pardon, anyone?
I just want to say no compromise, no retreat.
Okay, my sister, thank you.
And I want to announce the impending destruction of capitalism and imperialism.
I love it. I love it. Look what I put in there: forward ever, backward never. A luta continua.
I see. Now, you know, the Freedom Friday movement is every second Friday of the month. This month we may not have one on the exact date. We're still working on it because the UNIA is having its High Executive Council meeting, and we'll be in the Virgin Islands. So it may be, you know, we got to put things together to do it there. It just may happen. It will be dealing with women's issues because this is Women's History Month. So you may get some information on that. In April, there are a couple of other things. We'll be dealing with culture in April. You know, culture being young people in that sense as well, how we can connect culture to the revolutionary movement, you know, a revolutionary type instead of just this kind of culture that's, you know, just messing up the minds of our young people. We're gonna trying to work into somewhere where we can get young people, young artists and all that to come together in some fashion, some form, to produce things that that will help them or open their minds or raise their consciousness. Like the young brother who's now in the Division 330, he's gonna be having his blog. Is it a blog? What is he having? Mama Tendai?
It's a podcast.
A podcast. Okay,
Yeah,
he's a
okay.
podcast. So we got to be supportive of him doing this, because I'm sure he's aiming that to young people, because we really and truly need to get their ears, their eyes, and their attention.
Yeah, he's putting
Seriously.
together a document to submit to you for your approval. That's have his list of the programs that he wants to present.
Well, that's the division's approval, not just mine, my sister.
I mean, for the division, yeah.
Yes, okay. All right. Okay, well, certainly. Okay. So that's it, folks. I appreciate your being on. That it was a wonderful conversation. You know, you know, this is the kind of stuff we got to keep having, because I mean, we were talking like Arturo and others have said, you know, we can't just keep talking, we got to start doing. And part of our doing is this here, because if we can't get our people's mind to be conscious enough to understand that together is how we're going to do it, you know, then we're not going to get anywhere. Now, as we say in the UNIA, our motto is one God, one aim, one destiny. And I close with you folks, and thank you very much again for being on this here, the Freedom Friday Forum of March 11, 2022. Thank you very much. God bless.
Thank you.
Relate to.
All right. All right.
Ashe.
Yeah.
That's it.